Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was at my desk on the 22nd floor of the Exchange on LaSalle, a mid-century office tower in the Chicago Loop that had been renovated a dozen times since it opened. Most of our people, systems analysts, implementation specialists, and support engineers, worked on 2 full floors tied together by a central stair. The day had started with regular status calls and a calendar block to replace fans in a rack that had been running hot in our server closet. It was a weekday, just after 10:40 a.m., and I was answering a vendor email about a data feed when the building's fire alarm didn't just beep. It locked into a continuous tone, followed by a chime I had never heard before. Then the intercom cut in with a monotone voice that overrode every conference room and hallway speaker. Emergency alert. Do not exit the building. Shelter in place. Lock all interior doors. Blackout window coverings immediately. Await further instructions. It repeated 3 times in the same even cadence, then the alarms resumed. Every workstation phone on our floor displayed the same message on their LCD screens, pushed by whatever system the property manager used for emergency paging. It was not the usual fire drill script and not the severe weather protocol. I stood up and felt that old, reflexive urge to head for the stairs, but our facilities manager, Raj Mehta, had already stepped into the central corridor and raised both hands. "Nobody to the stairwells," he said, the calm of a man who had been through too many building audits to rattle easily. "You heard the message. This is a shelter order." "What kind of shelter order blacks out the windows?" asked our office administrator Marta, already halfway to the motorized shades controls along the exterior glass. "All windows," Raj said. "Close them now. Elena, lock interior doors. Anyone in the pantry, bring out water and snacks. Graham, help me get the floor wardens to check bathrooms." Our security supervisor, Elena Torres, a former hotel loss prevention lead with a binder for every possible scenario, started at the reception side and walked door to door, testing each lever. Our suites used an access control system with HHID readers on the main entrances and simple cylindrical locks on the interior offices. The systems were fail-safe. In a power loss, the corridor doors would unlock, the stair doors would unlatch, and the elevators would park themselves at the lobby. But the voice hadn't said anything about power. It had said blackout, lock, and wait. I helped Marta close the shades. Lutron Sivaya QS, low-voltage tracks tied to a control keypad. When the last fabric panel slid into place and snapped into its magnetic channel, the daylight vanished, replaced by the strip LEDs over our bench desks and the pale downlights in the corridors. The floor felt smaller. In the server room, my racks hummed inside a glass box with its own crack unit and a simplex 4100 ES panel repeater on the wall. Even there, on the small annunciator, the message flashed in red: "Shelter in place." Phones lit up. Messages flew across teams. A few people joked nervously that maybe there was a parade or some accident in the lobby. Others stared at their screens, waiting for their feeds to load. After about 40 seconds, half the chat icons went gray. My cell signal, already unreliable in the center of the floor, dropped to 0 bars. Wi-Fi still worked, but anything outside our network felt like it had been unplugged from the world. I tried an old trick and placed a desk phone POTS call through the building switch. It rang once and died. It was not a carrier outage. It was as if the lines had been cut upstream. "Conference room A," Raj called, "all team leads." When we gathered, Elena set a radio on the table, a black Motorola APX portable that belonged to the building. She had one because we were a major tenant. The display scrolled on and then froze at a single-channel number. She listened for a moment with her head tilted, as if sound could be teased apart like threads. "Property management is on P1, she said quietly. "They're not calling floors. It sounds like the same message is running across all speakers. Nothing else." "Is there an incident in the lobby?" asked our CFO, Graham Jensen. He had the practical impatience of a man who measured risk in spreadsheets and schedules. "We can't shut down operations without knowing what we're facing. If this is a police action outside, our staff still need to—" "Stop," Elena said softly, not unkind. "We're going to follow the order until it's changed. We lock, we shelter, we account for everyone. After that, we assess." We ran a quick head count, 67 on the 2 floors, plus 2 contractors replacing air diffusers in the open ceiling, and 1 intern who had gone downstairs to a sandwich shop 30 minutes earlier. His name was Noah. He hadn't come back. We wrote his name on the whiteboard and circled it. By 11:20 a.m., the alarm ceased. The intercom ran the message again. Then nothing. The building's background noise, pressurized air through diffusers, elevator counterweights sliding, faint plumbing flow, took over the sound of our day. In that new quiet, the people I work with showed their training. We shut down non-essential power at our breaker panels. We turned off half the lighting circuits to stretch the emergency load. We wheeled coffee urns to the corridor and filled them with tap water. We pulled the first aid kits from both floors and laid out nitrile gloves and gauze. Our developer, Kelsey, who kept a well-stocked backpack under her desk, contributed a crank radio, a headlamp, and a neatly coiled length of paracord, as if this were all just a planned resiliency drill. Nobody asked her why she had it. Everyone was thankful that she did. At 12:05 p.m., a tremor passed through the tower. Not an earthquake roll, but a brief, deep vibration that touched the soles of shoes and made ceiling tiles barely chatter. It was like standing on a platform as a freight train barreled through 2 tracks away. We all felt it in our bones. People looked at each other with the same cautious question in their eyes. Chat windows lit up again. "Did you feel that?" Someone typed into a channel whose title now felt absurd. #lunch plans. Raj looked at the ceiling, then at the wall where the risers ran. "Not our mechanicals," he said. "Too low frequency. Could be from the street, heavy equipment." "What kind of equipment makes the windows a threat?" Marta asked, standing near a slit where 2 shades met. Elena stepped over and gently pressed the fabric overlap into place. "The first hour of any emergency is action. The second is questions." By 1:30 p.m., we were fully in the second. With cell networks cut, our only information was the message in our ceiling speakers. People who kept small emergency radios at their desks pulled them out and extended their telescoping antennas. They found noise. We discovered that break rooms run out of bottled water faster than anyone expects when every person decides to stock a water bottle at exactly the same moment. Graham started a ledger on a clipboard for supplies. We listed our assets like a small vessel sealing hatches against a storm. 12 5-gallon water jugs in the janitor's closet. 10 flats of 12-ounce cans in the vending machine. 80 protein bars in the wellness cabinet. A crate of assorted snacks left over from a canceled all hands, and 4 big boxes of drip coffee. The building had water, yes, but if we did not trust what was happening outside, we would ration. At 2:10 p.m., property management finally spoke directly on the radio. The voice was controlled and brief. "Shelter order remains in effect. All tenants are to remain in place. Building systems are stable. Do not attempt to exit." Elena pushed the transmit button. "Control, this is 22. We have 67 accounted for, 2 contractors, 1 missing who was off-floor at the time of the alert. Do you have information on when the order will be lifted?" 22, negative on time estimate. Continue shelter in place. Raj scribbled it down, because writing felt like control. By 3 p.m., a dull thud sounded from above us, somewhere near the mechanical penthouse. It was followed by a series of clanks, as if something had been bolted or unbolted. Our stair doors remained locked by the usual maglocks, but the panel lights next to them glowed a steady amber instead of the green we saw during normal business hours. We tried to badge out to the stairwell and found that our credentials worked, but the door beyond would not move. The lever depressed. The latch did not retract. It was as if something outside, in the stairwell itself, had been engaged. A physical block. Stair pressurization? I asked, remembering smoke control lectures. If the system runs, it can push on the door enough to... No, Raj said, shoulder against the door as he tested it gently. This is mechanical. They've installed bars, or sleeves. We're meant to stay on our side. Elena, can building control open it? Graham asked. She pressed her radio transmit again. The answer was immediate and absolute. Negative. Do not attempt to exit. By 5:30 p.m., the light behind the shades had shifted so that our interior LED glow looked harsher against the flat gray. People began to pace. The hum of the crack in the server room became, somehow, both reassurance and reminder that everything was being held up by a set of systems we did not see. I did a walkthrough of the racks. 2 42U cabinets, a 24-port top-of-rack switch in each, our firewalls with their WAN lights dark, our hypervisor hosts breathing contentedly under a load they could carry for days. Our UPS units read 87% battery, pegged because building power still fed them. I put my hand on the glass and felt warmth. I thought about that warmth multiplied across a city's worth of rooms like this and wondered who else was looking at a little glass box and asking themselves how long stable would last. At 6:15 p.m., Elena asked me to pull the emergency satellite phone from our continuity kit. We kept it in a Pelican case labeled with a laminated sheet. Iridium 9555. The plan had always been to climb to the roof in a communications failure and dial out from the open sky. The roof hatch was now very likely barred. Still, we could try from a window. We took the phone into the corner conference room and cracked the blackout system at the top where fabric met pocket, just enough to thread the thin antenna toward the glass. The phone booted, chirped, and stared at us with an empty rectangle where bars should be. I tried the same at another window further down the line. The same result. Could they be jamming signals? Kelsey asked. Windows might be metallized, I said. A lot of retrofits use low-E laminate, but this used to work near glass. If the roof is the only option. I let the thought die. The stairwell door was unyielding. At 8 p.m., we organized sleeping zones. Some lay across 3 office chairs pushed together, some under desks, some on the carpet where the open office space widened near the windows. People who had rolled their eyes at our quarterly drills now helped tape small paper signs to walls. Quiet zone, pantry line, restroom queue. Inside the pantry, I filled 5-gallon jugs from the sink and lugged them to the corridor. The water pressure was the same as it had been in the morning. The city, out there somewhere, still supplied the building, and the building still lifted it through risers up to our floor. The night brought the first sound that none of us could place in a box we already knew. At 10:12 p.m., a low, layered roar rolled somewhere outside and below us, muffled by glass and concrete and 22 floors, but unmistakable. It was not the turbulence of wind against facades. It was not a helicopter. It was something that lasted for 12 seconds, climbed in pitch in a way that felt like it was coming closer, and then stopped abruptly in the middle of a rise. For a moment after, we could feel a faint vibration in our shoe soles, and then it was gone. Construction, someone said. because names keep fear small. Maybe emergency works. In the morning, we divided work like a small city. Raj and I checked electrical panels. Elena rotated radios and listened for building control. Marta and Lydia from HR organized hygiene. Trash bags lined in the restrooms. A schedule to flush and clean. A daily allotment of hand soap and paper towels. Kelsey inventoried every person's desk snacks and added them to Graham's clipboard. We set expectations: 3 small meals per day and coffee in the morning only. Nobody argued. People speak plainly when the alternatives are unclear. At 9:45 a.m., we learned that the windows were more than shades. Kelsey had brought a fiber inspection camera, essentially a snake on a wire from her desk, where she used it to photograph serial numbers on equipment without moving it. We slid its cable under a shade edge and tried to angle it toward the glass. The tip hit something rigid and scraped. Raj took the camera and worked it gently, then carefully threaded it sideways. On the little screen, we saw the edge of the mullion, then white metal where a bracket had been fastened. Not on the shade, on the frame. "They've mounted something directly to the frame," Raj said. "Interior side." "What, like an inside shutter?" Graham asked. "Looks like a plate," Raj said, "to block light out and sightlines in." "Who is they?" someone asked. "Whoever has control of crews," Elena said. "They moved fast. This wasn't here last week." We tried 3 more windows. Each had the same plate, secured with tamper-proof screws that none of us could match with the bits in our toolkits. It was clean work. Our shades were just the fabric face of a deeper blind. At noon on day 2, property management spoke again on the radio. "All floors maintain shelter order. Building systems remain stable. Do not attempt to exit. Do not approach exterior windows." "Do you have information on the situation outside?" Elena asked, voice professional and precise. "We have individuals who need medication and one missing from our head count. We require an estimate." "Negative," the voice said. "Continue to shelter." After lunch, we tried the freight elevator call button. The light came on when we pressed it, but no car came. We knew better than to pry doors. We knocked on them like a ritual, human hands asking a machine to answer. It did not. That afternoon, I pulled the ceiling tiles above our pantry and followed the cable tray with a flashlight. It was a tidy forest of low-voltage lines. PO runs for access points, speaker wire for the voice system, thermostat cable for the VAU boxes. I found a junction box where an unfamiliar line split into our suite. A small metal can, sealed and mounted near the wall. It hummed faintly, a barely audible buzz that you could feel by touching the cover. "What is it?" Kelsey asked, standing on the counter to hold the flashlight for me. "Signal re-radiator maybe," I said. "Or a filter. Someone wired it between our riser and our floor. It's active and we don't have a breaker for it." "Do we pull it?" "No," I said. "If it's tied to life safety, we don't touch anything we don't fully understand." That night, the low roar came twice. The second time, it was accompanied by a staccato tremor that made cutlery jitter in drawers and sent a faint rattle through the glazing clips around the conference room. It lasted less than a minute and left everyone in silence, listening for an echo that did not come. In that silence, Lydia spoke for the first time all evening. "My mother lives in Pilsen," she said. "I promised her I'd call at lunch." She looked at her phone as if willing it to work by care alone. "She'll think I forgot." On day 3, we used the service-level kitchen to bake bread. Kelsey had found flour and yeast in a bottom cabinet, leftovers from an office cooking class. Someone remembered how to proof yeast in warm water. The building ovens still worked, and when the loaves came out, the smell traveled. a simple comfort that replaced the metallic taste of stress with something older. We ate slices in silence and then not in silence. People told stories of other power failures and snow days. Normal stories. Life claims its space even when circumstances crush in. That afternoon, Sophia Nguyen knocked on our glass door. She was not from our company. She wore scrubs under a gray cardigan and carried a small backpack over one shoulder. I had met her once on the elevator. She worked 2 floors down for a group of nurse educators who maintained training material for clinics. She had gotten trapped on our side of the stairwell just as the order hit. Elena admitted her and added her name to the board. "Thank you," Sophia said, setting the backpack on a table. "My team is split across 3 floors. I can help with first aid. I also have an emergency radio with a wider band. May I try it?" We tried it, rotating the small knob across channels. Where our desk radios had found only static, hers found intermittent bursts of digital noise and one voice transmission that lasted 3 seconds and cut off mid-sentence. We rewound our ears around its clipped syllables and got only a fragment. "East Cordon." Then a hiss. "Cordon," Elena repeated. "So there are perimeters." "Are we inside or outside any perimeter?" Graham asked. "I don't know," Elena said. It was always the truest answer. On the afternoon of day 4, in the center of our 22nd floor hallway, Noah came back. He was the intern who had left for a sandwich just before the alert. Nobody saw him appear. One moment, we were all on our own errands. The next, Elena was calling for everyone in a voice that was still calm but had urgency at its edges. Noah stood at our reception desk in the half-light, one hand on the lip of the counter, looking like a person who had not slept. His jacket was torn at one sleeve, not dramatically, but grabbed by something that did not yield. Dirt ran along the knees of his jeans and into the weave. He had a cut across the back of his left hand, shallow, clean, and already drying. When Elena asked him how he had gotten back in, he told us that the stairwell door had been latched, yes, but the 21st floor had an interconnecting stair to a law firm. Their door had been propped. People were moving between corporate floors in small clusters, trading food for chargers, asking questions nobody could answer. "Where have you been?" Lydia asked gently, as if speaking too loudly might close the door he had just opened. "Everywhere," he said, voice hoarse. "Down to the lobby on the freight elevator when a car finally came, but the lobby was sealed. There are these plates bolted to the glass and metal frames around the entrance. Security wouldn't let anyone close. They had a table with water. They kept repeating the message. Some people were at the windows on the 2nd floor, trying to look between plates, and guard staff asked them to step back. I went to the 3rd floor and then back up stairwells until I found a door that would open. I ducked into a space with copier paper boxes and sat there for an hour because it was quiet. Then I tried more floors. I heard that some people on 19 got a message through a landline to an outside office, but then it cut. He stopped there, as if he had run to the end of his words. "Sit," Sophia said, hand gentle on his elbow. "Drink water. Then tell us what you remember, one piece at a time." He told us about the lobby water table, about a maintenance worker on P2 who said that delivery bays were welded shut from the outside, about a group of people on 16 who had tried to force a window plate and had given up when the screws stripped. He told us that an exterior sound, deeper than a diesel pile driver and closer than any helicopter, had rolled down LaSalle at around 2 a.m. the night before. People on the east side of the building had felt its vibration more than those on the west. He told us that a young man on 15 had attempted to text through a narrow opening at a window edge with his phone pressed directly to the glass, and had claimed to get one message out on a half bar before his phone went dead. People argued with him about whether this could be true. People needed one message to have been delivered to someone. "Did you see outside?" I asked. "Only shadows," he said. "Only shapes that move." "You mean people's reflections?" Marta asked. "No," he said, "that was all." He did not add adjectives. He looked at the floor for a long time after that and breathed like a person who was trying to slow his pulse by willing it. We didn't ask more questions that night. Day 5 broke with a different kind of sound. It came from inside the building. A slow, sweeping pulse through the ventilation shafts, as if the supply fans had been modulated. The smell shifted too. Something like a disinfectant you cannot name because you only ever smell it in hospitals after late appointments. The hum climbed, then fell, as if a cycle were running. "Smoke control isn't supposed to run unless the panel sees an event," Raj said, kneeling under a ceiling return with a small vane anemometer to check airflow. The numbers drifted and then leveled. "They're doing something in the AHU," he said. "Not heat, not cool, a purge." "Is that safe?" Sophia asked. "I don't know what they're filtering for," Raj said. "But the system is designed to exchange air. It can do that." We made masks from office supplies because it made people calmer. Conference room tissue boxes disappeared. Elastic bands from the supply cabinet vanished. We knew it was more ritual than science, but rituals matter. They keep hands busy and give people a thing to wear that says, "I am doing something." At noon, Elena tried the radio again. "Control, any update?" A pause. "Control, this is 22, she tried again. The radio clicked alive. "Maintain shelter, do not exit, do not approach glass. Mechanical purge will continue until further notice." "Is there a health hazard outside?" Sophia asked into the mic. "Maintain shelter," the voice said again. Then nothing. That afternoon, as we stood in the corridor eating small portions of bread with peanut butter, a sound came that no one mistook for anything else. It was a voice from outside, not the intercom and not from any speaker. It arrived muffled by glass and distance, but human, calling a name none of us recognized. "Anthony," it called, and then again, closer, drawn out in a way that set the hairs on the back of my neck up despite all the plain explanations we had spent 5 days telling ourselves. "Anthony," it called a third time, and then there was silence. "Someone is out there," Kelsey said, halfway to the shade before Elena's hand was on her arm. "Step back," Elena said, her voice low but clear. "We do not violate the window order." "We can't just ignore a person asking for help," Kelsey said, pulling her arm back but not stepping forward again. "We don't know what is outside," Sophia said. "We don't know what is drawing voices to our building, or if that voice belongs to someone who can be helped by us." "What if it's our missing?" Lydia asked. "What if Anthony is another person's Noah?" "Then the building would not black out every pane and bolt every door," Elena said. "The order says we are not to approach glass. We follow it unless we see a direct threat to someone right in front of us that we can fix. We cannot fix the street from here." That night, the voice came again. Not the same name, not the same tone, but with the same cadence, the same way of ending a call in the same place as if it were a line read. "I am not a nervous person by default. I am the person you call when a rack throws errors at 2 a.m. and a storage cluster needs attention without drama." That night, for the first time, I turned my desk chair toward the interior of the floor rather than face the window. On day 6, we broke the building into zones and assigned teams. We did rounds every 2 hours to check on people who had withdrawn to small offices and wrapped themselves in their own worries. Lydia and Marta built a schedule to get everyone to move, to stretch, to drink water. Graham and I examined the electrical one more time and made a plan for a controlled shutdown cascade if the grid flickered. Servers first to maintenance mode, then hypervisors paused, then racks run on UPS only to test battery hold time, then idle. The kind of plan we wrote in papers we hoped no one would read. Pulling numbers and assembling contingencies was the one thing we could do in a situation that did not want to be contained. At 3:25 p.m., something heavy rolled along the street outside. You can tell the difference between a truck and something else by the way the vibration rises into the body of a building. This was not rubber on asphalt. It was weight on weight, and it made our coffee cups skitter microscopically on a table. Again, it lasted less than a minute. Again, it ended abruptly, as if the switch had been thrown from above. I pictured steel plates covering streets, laid down to tape over something under the pavement, and then told myself not to invent an outside we had no proof for. Then, just before 4 p.m., 3 short tones sounded in our ceiling speakers, not the same as the initial alert, but new. We all looked up like we expected the plaster to reply. The monotone voice returned. "Maintain shelter. Do not exit the building. Do not approach exterior windows. Interim resupply will commence in designated zones tonight." "Resupply?" Graham repeated, standing fully upright for the first time all day. Elena keyed the mic. "Control, this is 22. Clarify resupply." No answer. It came at 8:40 p.m. The freight elevator lights blinked in sequence. Up, down, up, and then the car arrived with a chime. Elena and Raj were already at the doors. When they parted, we saw pallets, wrapped in clear film, labeled with printed letters: water, dry goods, first aid. A security officer stood inside the car with a clipboard and a mask that made his voice sound as flat as the intercom. "You will receive 2 pallets," he said. "Unwrap, remove, and leave the pallets in the elevator. Do not exit. The car will move when it senses weight removed." "Is resupply building-wide?" Elena asked. "Yes." "Is there news from outside?" "I do not have that information," he said. We cut the plastic with a key and moved cases hand over hand. The supplies were unbranded bulk, bottles with plain labels listing volume and mineral content, cardboard boxes of shelf-stable meals, 4 small coolers of ice packs and gel packs labeled for sprains and strains. There were no phones. There were no radios. There were no printed notices. On the last pallet, under a shrink-wrapped layer of water, we found a small packet with a half-sheet inside. Shelter order remains in effect. Resupply will continue as needed. Do not approach glass. Do not attempt egress. Await instruction. The car doors closed. The indicator slid down. Somewhere below, other floors did what we had just done. We stacked cases. We rewrote the ledger to reflect new totals. We handed every person a water bottle and a meal pack. For the first time since the order, people smiled without working at it. On day 7, the building's internal hum shifted again. A mechanical rhythm we had gotten used to went away. Silence in a big system is more noticeable than sound. Raj checked readouts and put a hand on the metal door of an electrical room like you touch a hood to see if an engine is still warm. "Generator test cycle," he said. "They've taken the load to test the standby set." "Our lights didn't dip," I said. "They did it clean," he said with admiration and worry braided in the same sentence. "But they're planning for a contingency." That afternoon, a message flashed on every desk phone and every conference room panel. Extended shelter order. It did not include a time. It did not include a date. It did not include a reason. If the point had been to reduce speculation, the result was the opposite. "We can't live in here indefinitely," Graham said, standing in the central corridor with the board behind him. We have a week of supplies at these ration levels, 2 if we stretch, but the order has no end. There has to be a plan to leave in an organized way." "Leave into what?" Lydia asked. "That," he admitted, "is not known." Elena listened to everyone, then spoke quietly. "Here's what I know. I know that a centralized authority can send supplies and run a building at this scale. I know that whatever is outside is incompatible with unregulated foot traffic on streets. I know that we have been ordered to stay away from glass and doors. So we will plan for 3 scenarios. 1, the order lifts and we are guided out in phases. 2, the order remains and resupply sustains us. 3, the order lifts without guidance and we must move ourselves. We will prepare for all 3 without violating the current order while it is active." "What about a 4th?" Kelsey asked. "What if this is containment for our sake?" "Then containment remains until it does not," Elena said, "and we will still need plans." We began to plan. Plan 1 was easy. We gathered go bags for each person with a water bottle, 2 meal packs, a pair of nitrile gloves, a flashlight, and a printed card with our names and emergency contacts to hand to whoever would manage an exit. Plan 2 meant rebuilding our schedule around a new normal. Cleaning squads, water runs, temperature checks that Sophia taught us to do twice daily to catch fevers early, quiet hours for people to sleep in shifts. Plan 3 required the most thought. It meant scouting without breaking orders. It meant building a mental map of every feasible path that did not require an exterior door, service corridors, interfloor stairs, mechanical levels. Our building had a mechanical interstitial between 23 and the roof. If a path existed that allowed a look outside without touching glass, it would be there. On day 8, we learned that other floors were not as cohesive. A man from 25 pounded on our door asking for batteries because their radios had died. He carried a bundle of portable toothbrushes like an offering. Elena gave him what we could spare and asked about their organization. "It's fraying," he said, eyes moving a bit too fast. "People keep wanting to check the windows. We pulled down a plate and the guards came. They didn't come into our floor. They stood in the stairwell and told us to stop. There was a noise outside when we started, like," he thought for a moment, "like things moving fast that aren't cars." "Please tell your lead to maintain the order," Elena said. "Nobody needs enforcement to visit our floors, and keep your people away from glass." That night, the voice outside came again. Not one voice, several overlapping, all calling names that stretched and bent as if they had been learned from recordings. They drifted along the street like an auditory weather front, rising and falling, then sliding away. The building's plates and blinds turn them into a presence you feel in your chest more than words you parse. Even the people who had treated this as a drill stopped pretending to themselves. The corridor filled with people sitting hip to hip, not talking, listening without wanting to. On day 9, we tested the route to the mechanical level. It was a legitimate path. No exterior doors, no windows, an interior service stair behind a locked door that Elena could badge because of her relationship with building staff. The stair was quiet and smelled faintly of metal shavings and oil. At the top, a steel door led to the interstitial where the air handlers lived. It was not a place for tenants. It was filled with ductwork and valves and control boxes. It also had in its far corner a maintenance hatch with a louver. Not a window. A louver with fixed blades set to pull outside air in. The blades were angled down and inward to keep rain out. If we crouched low, we could see an inch of angled daylight between them. "We're not approaching exterior glass," Elena whispered. A boundary she needed to say out loud. "This is ventilation." We listened first. Nothing but the slow heartbeat throb of the AHU fan, the kind of sound that becomes silence if you hear it long enough. Then we looked. Not faces, not streets, light and shadow. The louver gave us a view down an alley along the building's east side. We could not see the street itself, only the vertical plane of a wall opposite ours, and the thin line of ground between. The light was wrong for the time of day, as if something not a cloud passed over sun in square waves. There were no pedestrians. There were no cars. There were, however, shapes that moved through the band of ground at the alley edge. Shapes low to the surface like pieces of fabric carried by wind and then moving against the wind, if there had been any. On the wall of the building opposite, high up where pigeons like to roost, there were no pigeons. Their usual smudges and trails were old, and nothing had replaced them. I did not say that out loud. It felt like an observation I could keep to myself without betraying my responsibility to our group. Back on our floor, we did not tell everyone what we had seen. We told Elena's leadership circle and wrote it in a sealed envelope to open if someone needed to know in our absence. It was not that we wanted to keep secrets. It was that without a way to act on the information, adding it to the stress on the floor did not reduce risk. It increased it. On day 10, resupply came again. The same elevator, the same masked officer, the same unlabeled bulk goods. This time, there were more first aid supplies, non-prescription medications for pain and fever, electrolyte packets, adhesive bandages, and a roll of printed notices with plain instructions. Continue sheltering. Keep interior doors locked. Cover any openings that expose the exterior. We looked at each other when we read that last line. Our louver. We taped the notice to the wall. We did not cover the louver that day. On day 11, the building did its generator test again. It lasted longer. Raj listened to the relay clacks at the panel like a doctor with a stethoscope. "They're not just testing," he said. "They're shifting loads." "Why would they shift loads?" I asked. "Because supply is variable," he said. "Or because they're islanding buildings to balance a campus. Either way, we should assume flexibility built into the plan, which means the plan is not a 12-hour plan." That evening, in the quiet, Sophia sat with a small group and taught a class she called Keeping Calm When Calm Does Not Want to Stay. She had order in her voice. She had spent her early career in emergency departments and knew the difference between an event and the space after an event that stretches far enough to become a state. She showed people how to ground their breathing when thoughts spiraled. She asked people to speak memories of normal things, not big milestones, but small routines. A bus route they liked, a morning coffee walk, a favorite seat on a train car. The room warmed with people remembering themselves. For an hour, our floor expanded back to its old size. On day 12, the first conflict broke. It was small as conflicts go, but it was a crack along a line that had been drawn for days. A man from our analytics team wanted to pry open one of the window plates. He argued that if we could see outside, we could plan for real instead of guessing. He had a toolkit and a plan for using a screw extractor to pull a tamper-proof fastener. He had 3 other people willing to help. Elena told him no. He raised his voice. Elena did not. She reminded him of the order, the resupply, the on-air instruction not to approach glass, and the possibility that a security team would respond in a way none of us wanted. He set down his drill slowly, the way you put a thing down when all you want to do is put your hand through a wall. Then, to his credit, he went and sat by a window with his back to it and stared at the carpet until his breath evened. The drill stayed on the table for an hour before Kelsey quietly moved it back to the toolbox and shut the lid. On day 13, voices outside again. This time, they were accompanied by a different sound. A brief, directed tone that bounced the way sirens bounce between buildings, followed by silence that was louder than the tone. After, the name-calling stopped for the night. We wondered if the tone had come from drones or from speakers mounted somewhere we could not see. We wondered if it had worked on something other than people. On day 14, Elena called a meeting. "We continue to shelter," she said. "We continue to accept resupply. We also prepare reconnaissance that remains within orders. We will not touch glass. We will not breach doors. We will not put anyone in the stairwell who cannot justify their presence there. But we will go to the mechanical level louver again with a better instrument." I'd borrowed a device from our AV contractor, a narrow-field inspection camera with a small articulating head and an infrared mode designed for ducks. We took it to the louver. With the lights in the interstitial off, the IR view painted the alley in bloom and outline. Heat signatures glowed where sun had warmed metal edges. The band of ground was cooler than I expected for the hour. In the far distance, a shape like a vertical pole moved along in the faint IR, then multiplied into 3, like a triplicate image. They were not poles, of course. They were, here a sober word, unknowns. The articulating head knocked a louver blade, making a soft metallic click. 2 of the shapes paused. I withdrew the camera in one smooth motion, and the shapes moved on. We exhaled at the same time without meaning to. Back on our floor, we sealed the envelope with an update none of us wanted to write. We returned to our routines. We counted water. We rotated sleeping arrangements so nobody got too used to a single corner. We held another small class. People cried in the quiet of small offices where others could pretend not to hear them. People laughed at jokes to which the punchline was, "Remember when the office coffee machine jammed for a whole week?" People did video-free meetings on laptops that went nowhere, using them as placeholders for momentum. Work was not the point, but pretending to work kept hands and minds moving. On day 15, resupply did not come at its usual evening time. An hour passed, 2. People stood by the freight doors as if waiting for a bus. At 10:05 p.m., the elevator indicator lit and the car finally opened. The same pallets, the same masked officer, but this time his hands shook as he signed the clipboard. He handed Elena a second half-sheet. It had fewer words. "Shelter order remains. If you hear a sustained tone over the intercom, move to interior rooms and wait for an all-clear message." "What would cause a sustained tone?" Elena asked. "I don't have that information," he said. At 1:20 a.m., the sustained tone sounded. It cut through dreams and rose from the floor through the bottoms of beds and chairs. It was a single pure note that filled the air and left no space for anything else. Elena and Raj were already moving when most of us were still struggling out of our blankets. "Interior rooms," Elena said, and people moved, taking their go-bags and pressing into conference rooms and the breakout areas in the core with no exterior walls. I hauled the server room door open and stood inside the glass enclosure with the airstream from the crack unit washing over me. The tone lasted 47 seconds and then went silent. After, the building made a sound I had never heard, a bass-heavy cascade-like pressure moving through lungs. The AAHU roared for a full minute and then returned to baseline. The intercom stayed silent. We waited. 5 minutes later, the voice returned. "All clear, maintain shelter." We exhaled again as a unit. The voice had not changed pitch. I would have sworn there was a catch in it if it had been a person, but it was not a person. It was a recording. In the days that followed, the city outside pressed into our lives in small ways. We could smell the lake in the morning when the AHU pulled air at a certain rate. We could hear, once, a distant chorus of horns like a ship, but shorter and stacked above each other, as if a cluster of things were signaling to one another out of view. We could feel, on day 19, a tremor that came with such a low-frequency pulse that our stomachs fluttered as if we had stepped too close to a speaker at a concert. We did not become used to these. We learned to live around them. On day 21, Elena asked me to sit with her in the reception area, where the light from the corridor bled just enough into the gloom to make the plants look like shapes again. "We're going to have to choose soon," she said. "What choice do we have?" "We can continue to shelter until told otherwise," she said. "Or we can use the interstitial to move, to find a stair that isn't bracketed, to go to a level where someone has negotiated an escorted exit. There are rumors of scheduled departures from certain lobbies. There are rumors that certain streets are safe at certain hours. There are also rumors that none of that is true." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to follow the order because it has, so far, kept us alive without direct confrontation with whatever is out there," she said. "I also want to see my brother and my father again." We did not decide that night. We decided on day 23, when the radio crackled with a new message. It was quick, and it was not directed to us but to designated floors A through D, which meant nothing to us until Raj remembered that the building had an internal code for tower zones that did not match tenant floors. Our zone was C. The message said, "Designated floors A through D will be escorted to level 1, staging for egress at 9 a.m. Prepare to move in groups of 10. Bring identification in 1 bag per person." We looked at each other as if the ceiling had invited us to step through it. Then we packed in the open like people who had practiced in private for 2 weeks. We chose 1 bag per person. We left laptops that were personal but not precious. We took printed lists of our medication needs. We put on comfortable shoes and folded an extra pair of socks into each bag. We charged radios. We printed a copy of a map of our building that Raj had drawn by memory. At 8:30 a.m., we stood at our reception desk in lines of 10 with our hands by our sides and our mouths set. At 8:50 a.m., the intercom spoke. "Designated floors A through D, prepare to move. Maintain silence in the hallways. Keep eyes forward. Do not look at or through exterior glass." That last line lodged in our throats. A guard team met us at the freight doors. They were not in riot gear. They were in Navy uniforms with reflective bands and face shields. They carried radios, not long arms. They asked us to keep pace and stepped into the elevator with us. The doors closed. The car dropped. It opened at level 1 to a lobby that had been made into a corridor with plates and barriers. The beautiful stone and glass and metal of our building had been covered with fabric and aluminum in ways that would make an architect weep if all this were normal. It was not normal. The corridor led to a stair. We followed it down to a lower level that was not the parking garage but a service tunnel I had never seen. The tunnel lights were on. The air smelled like machine room and concrete dust. We walked to a line of people at a table where badges were scanned and names checked against a printout. We were told to move to a holding area. We moved. And then, because nothing flows without a snag, Noah turned to me and said, "I forgot my backpack." "You can go without it," I said before he could say more. "My insulin is in it," he said, his voice so level it took me a second to understand his meaning. I thought it was in my pocket. It's not. He had not mentioned he was diabetic. That was not on him. People keep their privacy until privacy is no longer an option. We had insulin upstairs in our kit because Sophia had asked in our first day survey and he had said nothing. It happens. It is human. Right now, it meant a decision. The line moved. The guard at the table called the next 10. Elena made the call in the space of a single breath. "We're not breaking the corridor," she said to the nearest guard. "We have medication on our floor. We can't proceed without it. What are our options?" "You can be processed with the next group," the guard said, "but you cannot return to your floor." "Then this group cannot proceed," she said. because we do not leave someone to complications from lack of medication. We will wait." The guard blinked behind his shield. He was young enough for me to think he had not been at this post for long. "Let me ask my lead," he said, and stepped away. We stood with our bags in the line while people flowed around us like water around stone. After 6 minutes, the lead came. A woman with a posture that said she had been inside operations rooms where voices stayed level even when hands shook under tables. "You have insulin upstairs?" she asked. "Yes," Sophia said, "labeled and refrigerated." "We have a clinic 4 blocks away," the lead said. "We can supply insulin there, but the corridor to street is under a schedule. We cannot make individual runs back to floors." "How long to the clinic?" Sophia asked. 10 minutes with an escort if the route is clear," the lead said. "Then we will proceed," Elena said, "with the escort." The lead held our eye for a beat as if measuring whether we were the sort of people who would walk well in a column. Then she nodded. "You stay together," she said. "You keep eyes forward. You do not look at or through exterior glass. If you hear a tone, you duck your head and wait for me to speak again. If you hear voices calling your name from outside, you do not respond." She said it with the same tone as, "Look both ways before crossing," and I realized then that for her this had become a sentence like that, one you say so many times it leaves grooves in your mouth. We moved. The service tunnel became a door with a camera over it and then a corridor between plates that had been bolted to the backs of columns and over decorative metalwork. The city beyond was present the way an ocean is present when you are inside a submarine. You feel its mass. You hear it through the skin of the vessel. You know it is there, even if you never touch it. At one junction, a plate seam did not meet perfectly, and a small triangle of daylight slipped through like a bright coin. Kelsey, in front of me, kept her eyes locked on the guard's back and did not turn her head. I did the same. We moved down a stair, through another door, and into daylight at street level that had been turned into not daylight by a tunnel of fabric and aluminum. If you had asked me before that morning whether a city could be made into a series of interior hallways without touching the exteriors of buildings, I would have said yes in theory, no in cost. It turns out cost is flexible when necessity has a hand on the ledger. We walked those hallways past intersections hinted at through light leaks, past the places where the steps under your feet changed pitch as concrete yielded to tile yielded to rubber mat, past what I think might have been the LaSalle Street Canyon where it always smells a little like brake pads. We did not look. We did not stop. We arrived at a doorway where the guard lead put a hand up and we waited while something happened in front of us that we did not see. Then she dropped her hand and we moved again. The clinic was inside what had been a bank branch. The counters were gone. The vault door was closed. Tables held supplies and labeled bins. A person in a white coat with a mask gave Sophia what she needed without commentary. We repacked Noah's kit. He looked like a person who had been underwater and had just found a handhold. "Thank you," he said to Sophia. "Next time, we pack backups in triplicate," she said without reproach, already writing in her small notebook what to ask for at the next resupply. On the way back to the building corridor, the guard lead slowed at a junction because something changed in her earpiece. She put her hand up. We froze. Then we heard it. The voices outside calling names, closer than I had ever heard them, overlapping and then harmonizing into something that might sound like help to anyone who had not stood at a window for 2 weeks and learned the contours of their cadence. The lead held us for 30 seconds, then moved again without looking toward the sound. We did not look either. We returned to the holding area and then into the lobby corridor and then into the freight elevator and then to our floor. because the schedule had changed and our group was not going out at 9 a.m. anymore. We would wait for an afternoon slot. People complained around us. People pleaded. People who had made the first wave sat with their bags in their laps, staring at a spot on the opposite wall as if staring could move them forward in time. Back at our suite, we put our bags down and looked at each other. Then we did the only thing we had done for 20-plus days. We made a plan for the next iteration. It was not dramatic. It was not a rebellion. It was what adults do when the world refuses to tell them when certainty will return. At 3 p.m., the intercom spoke again. Designated floors. A through D will be escorted in 30 minutes. Prepare to move. We did. We rechecked our bags. We counted our people. We tied our identification cards to our belts because lanyards catch on too many things. We used the restroom because practicalities do not pause for suspense. At 3:20 p.m., the freight doors opened. We moved. The route was different this time, as if the city were routing around something we did not need to know about. We passed through a hallway that had been made from 2 buses parked nose to tail with the windows painted from the inside. We walked along a corridor court like a sky bridge that had been repurposed. You could tell by the long span and the footfalls. We came to a door where a person in a long coat checked our names off and then asked us to open our bags for inspection. We did. The inspector glanced, not rummaged. She looked us in the eye and nodded. Then she opened the door behind her. The light that came in was indirect, filtered by tarps and scaffolding, but it was the first outside light that touched my face in 3 weeks. It felt like water tastes after a dry hike. We walked into a space I could not immediately place. It had the openness of a plaza but the ceiling of a temporary roof. A low line of vehicles stood along one side, vans and small trucks with their windows covered. We were directed toward one. We climbed in, the door slid shut, the vehicle moved. We did not see the street. We saw the inside of a vehicle and the faces of the people across from us and the way their eyes shifted when the outside made a sound we had learned. Twice, the vehicle paused and then resumed. Once, it idled while someone spoke to our driver through a small hatch. Once, the driver backed and then turned. At some point, the floor tilted in a way that told me we were driving up a ramp. At some other point, it tilted down. After 20 minutes that felt like 4 hours, the door slid open again. We stepped into a loading hall with bright lights and the smell of air that had been treated. It could have been any big building's basement, if not for the visible marks of quick construction. Modular partitions, caution tape, pallets of water stacked against a wall. A sign on a column read, "Processing." Another read, "Clinic." A third read, "Orientation." A volunteer took our names and handed us colored wristbands. The color matched the sign over one of the partitions. "Group C3, the volunteer said. "Follow the line. You'll have a briefing in 10 minutes. In the briefing room, a person in a clean uniform stood in front of a flat screen with a slide that had only text. "Welcome. You will be safe if you follow instructions." They spoke in the same measured tone as the intercom, but with a human cadence that caught once when they sipped water. "Here's what we will tell you," they said. "There has been an incident in the city that has affected the safety of open spaces. We are controlling movement to reduce exposure to hazards. We ask that you keep to covered routes and do not look toward or approach exterior glass, because patterns of light and shadow can be used to draw people into unsafe zones. We ask that you ignore voices outside that call to you, because sounds can be replicated by mechanisms designed to cause separation. We will relocate you to a safe zone where you will have shelter, food, and medical care until your residence area is assessed. We will reunite you with family if and when routes are clear. We know this is difficult. We do not sugarcoat your experience by pretending it is anything other than difficult. We do not give you information we cannot confirm. This is what we can confirm. You are safer inside our corridors than outside them. You are safer following our instructions than improvising your own. They did not use terms you see in movies. They did not name the hazard. They did not ask for belief. They asked for compliance and offered safety. It is not a fair trade for freedom if offered indefinitely. It is, in a crisis, a trade many will make to live. We were not yet released to any outside we recognized. We were in a different inside, one designed to keep us moving in channels away from edges. We would later learn that the corridor network connected to 4 other buildings and 2 underground transit spaces that had been turned into transfer points. We would later learn that what we had heard as voices outside were, in some places, recordings played by devices that hunted for responses, and in others, people who had gone too close to edges calling to people further in. We would learn it slowly and without drama, the way you learn the rules of a place you did not choose to enter but must respect to exit. The question that haunted our floor for days was the shelter ordered to protect us or to trap us, never had a neat answer. A trap is a thing that lures something to harm. A shelter is a thing that keeps something from harm. What we were in was a system. Systems look like both depending on where you stand. Inside our office, with our shades down and plates bolted to frames and doors that would not unlatch, it felt like a trap because the world had been moved away from us without our consent. In the processing hall, with water and wristbands and a schedule and a plan that did not include improvisation, it felt like shelter because the streets outside were not yet ready to receive us without risk we could not evaluate. That night, in a cot row, separated by partitions in what had been a high-ceilinged event space, I lay awake and listened to air move through ducts that had been built for gala nights with speeches. I thought of the louver and of the shapes that moved like fabric in wind that wasn't there. I thought of the voices calling names and the steady hand of the guard who told us not to look. I thought of the first message and the last message and how both had asked the same thing. Do not exit. The truth outside was not theatrical. It had no soundtrack. It was mechanical and patterned and deliberate, and the people managing it had built a city indoors because the outdoors did not belong to us right now. 3 days later, after orientation and scheduling and a check-in with a reunification desk where I left my parents' names and a promise to call when permitted, I stood with Elena at the edge of a corridor that led to a bus whose windows were painted from the inside. We would go from this building to a temporary housing center at a university field house. We would keep our wristbands on. We would attend briefings that told us precisely what they could tell us, and nothing more. We would put one foot in front of the other and carry our bags and learn the turns of new hallways. We would not see the street yet. We would live like that until we did. Elena looked at me, eyes steady. We made the right call, she said. We didn't break a window, we didn't run into voices. We followed a plan and made our own where theirs didn't reach. I know, I said. We'll be here for a while, she said. I know, I said again, because agreement was a form of strength. Behind us, Noah adjusted his bag and tapped his pocket where the insulin pen sat, a small thing with an outsized weight. Sophia nodded at him and then at me like a conductor proud of a section that had just played a difficult passage cleanly. Raj stood ahead, already looking at the ceiling grid of the new space like a man who would learn its panels until he could find any panel he needed in the dark. Lydia squeezed Marta's hand. Graham counted our people one more time for a number he already knew. We stepped forward when told. The door closed behind us with a soft seal. The bus moved. We did not look through glass we could not see through. We went where we were guided. It was not the freedom I would have chosen. It was the safety we had. And inside its boundaries, where we had been ordered not to exit, we found that choosing how to move, how to ration, how to speak to each other, and how to hold a line for one person's medication when a system wanted us to flow had been enough to carry us from one inside to the next. That was our truth, and it did not need names from outside to be real. And how to hold a line for one person's medication when a system wanted us to flow had been enough to carry us from one inside to the next. That was our truth, and it did not need names from outside to be real. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.